Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business program presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Eggs and Issues is supported by presenting sponsors Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare, in cooperation with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, First Light Fiber and Wex. Reception sponsors Key Bank, Clark Insurance, and Veryl Dana. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing Center. Community Corner sponsor Baker Newman Noise. Parking is provided by Sevi and Mayer Engineers. Our exclusive radio sponsor, WGAN. Listen weekday mornings to Ken and Matt on the WGAN Morning News. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW. And e-media sponsor, Maine Biz. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber of Commerce President, Jack Lufkin.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out here today. We've got a great program of events. As was said, my name is Jack Lufkin. I'm the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. As a reminder, we do have a bunch of upcoming events, and on your table is a little postcard which has them, so we don't need to take up a lot of time today talking about those, other than our annual Imagine Portland meeting, which is happening on January 30th at Brick South and Thompson's Point. This is our biggest network event of the year, and we're once again going to be celebrating some individuals and organizations that have promoted growth and prosperity in the Portland region. We'll be announcing our Leadership Award winners later this week, so please stay tuned, and we're going to be recognizing some amazing individuals and organizations. Moving on, I'd like to recognize and welcome our newest members to the Chamber. The following organizations have joined the Chamber in the past month: Town of Cape Elizabeth, Corridor Property Management, the Maine Brew Bus, Maine Showroom Realty, and People Ready. We greatly appreciate your membership, and we look forward to working with you in the coming months. So let's give them a round of applause. Also like to take a moment to thank our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. AAA of Northern New England and Springborn Staffing provides support for our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs program, which allows area high school and college students to attend Eggs and Issues. So with us today, we have students from Gorham High School, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. If you're here representing those organizations, would you please stand and be recognized? Baker Newman and Noise is, Portland Public Library is our FMI sponsor, who will provide you additional information regarding today's topic after this event. You'll receive that in your email later this week. Baker Newman and Noise sponsors our Community Corner program. Today we are going to be recognizing the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and soon we'll hear from their executive director, Jen Hutchins. Since 1994, the Maine Association of Nonprofits has grown to become Maine's comprehensive resources for the tools, knowledge, and connections nonprofits need to be effective and well-run. With a growing statewide membership of 900 nonprofits, 150 for-profit organizations, Maine Association of Nonprofit advances the public profile of Maine's nonprofits by highlighting their vital contribution to the quality of life in our state. MANP connects people, organizations, and resources from all sectors to foster collaborative problem solving and strengthen nonprofits by providing management training and leadership development programs, resources, and services that enhance their community's mission's impact. In addition to today's speaker, Jen, we have a large contingent of guests from the Maine Association of Nonprofits, including several nonprofit members. We have with us today Katie Manter, Jen Burns-Gray, Katrina Ruffner, Brooke Welty, Molly O'Connell, Doug Woodbury, Kelly McCormick, Betsy Sawyer-Manter, Matt Arbo, and Jerry Quealy. Thank you for being here today. Now, on to today's presentation. As stated earlier, Jennifer Hutchins is the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits. Prior to joining in July of 2016, she served as the Executive Director of Creative Portland, where she led the City of Portland's efforts to strengthen the creative economy. Jennifer has also served as the Director of Communications and External Affairs at USM's Muskie School and Marketing Director at Portland Stage Company. Her career started at organizations in Washington, D.C. and abroad before she returned to Maine in 1995. She holds a master's degree in public policy and management from the USM Muskie School and lives in Portland with her husband and 2 daughters. With findings from the Maine Association of Nonprofits soon to be released Adding Up Impact report, Jennifer will provide a snapshot of the nonprofit sector's impact on the Maine economy, including workforce and wage data, as well as highlights of how nonprofits stimulate economic development, provide critical community infrastructure, and cultivate quality of life throughout our state. Right now, we're going to watch a brief video detailing how much nonprofits impact communities, and then what I would like to do is, at the conclusion of the video, have Jen come right up to the stage. Thank you.
Have you ever considered how your life is better because of a nonprofit? Research shows that nonprofits are essential to the quality of life in our communities. They provide services to everyone from the most vulnerable to the most resource secure. Some things we take for granted were first introduced by a nonprofit, like the white lines on the side of the road, shown to decrease fatalities and injuries by 37%, saving thousands of lives per year. There are many other white lines that we can thank nonprofits for, like for the programs offered to ensure our youth have quality, productive time while their parents are at work. For the things that make life beautiful, art, music, parks, and theater. For the ways they create vibrant, livable communities. An educated workforce, a civically engaged public. And for making sure families have access to services, contributing to safe, healthy, and enriched lives. All of these white lines created by nonprofits are like strands woven together that make up our community fabric. The more tightly knit, the better and stronger our community. Let's remember how often we count on nonprofits. Join the Maine Association of Nonprofits in celebrating the vitality of all nonprofits serving Maine.
Good morning. I'm going to start with a little bit of a provocative confession for you. I really hate the season of giving. Okay, I don't hate it exactly, but it is the one time each year, it's the one time each year that nonprofits get the spotlight. And yet somehow it always feels lacking to me. It always seems to reduce the true scale and scope and professionalism and impact of our sector. Giving Tuesday, the endless annual appeal letters that are crowding your mailboxes this month, even the little red can out in the lobby. I really feel like it ends up perpetuating some of the stereotypes about nonprofits that I can tell you with 925 members just isn't true. Stereotypes about the struggling nonprofit that's always looking for the handout, that's just solely focused on the disadvantage and needs our benevolence. Today, I want to paint for you what is going to be, I hope, a more complete picture of nonprofits. One that highlights just how enmeshed they really are. Like the video says, how nonprofits are actually an essential community infrastructure that touches every single one of us. It's, if I can use the pun from the video, it's a two-way street. They give as much to us as we give to them. It needs to go both ways. And if there's a message I want to send to you today, is that nonprofits are part of a complex system that we have set up as Americans. A complex system of people and organizations from business, from government, and from nonprofits coming together and finding solutions and meeting challenges and taking advantage of opportunities together. And just as we need to understand the impact of the tourism industry, I love tourism. I know a lot about it from my previous job. It's a great thing to know about. The construction industry or the fishing industry. Hopefully today, I will show you some data that convinces you that it's equally as important for us to understand the importance of the nonprofit sector on our economy. So let me start with just saying, what the heck is a nonprofit after all? Many of you probably have a picture in your head when I say nonprofit, and you're probably right. But I'm going to go in a little more depth. In fact, one thing, I was recently talking with some French friends about what I do, and it's a little bit complicated. And I realized that, particularly in France, the public sector, government, takes care of public needs. And the private sector takes care of private ones. This idea that somehow there's something in the middle that does other stuff really was confusing to them. And that's essentially what nonprofits are for us in America, is that we've decided that there's a certain amount of work that we want, communities of Americans coming together and identifying a need or an opportunity in their community that either the public sector, government, or the private sector, business, opts not to or feels it can't address. Okay, so nonprofits are the ones that are carrying all that other stuff that we have decided we need. And then I want to share with you in just a minute a quote from someone who, I'll show you a quote in just a second. But let me tell you that in researching for today's presentation, I really wanted to understand, so what are the roots of nonprofits? When did they start? Well, they first started in the actual tax code at the end of the 19th century. But really, they have roots with the early settlers who came to the United States, and they immediately identified social needs that our burgeoning new young democracy was not quite equipped to handle. And these were hospitals, orphanages, fire departments. And another thing to note is that they were coming from monarchy government that they felt was suppressive, right? So here they came and they said, we don't want government in our business right now. And besides, our new democracy hasn't quite got up to speed. So especially here in New England, we have some really interesting roots of the nonprofit sector. Again, emphasizing the coming together of people, regardless of what sector they worked in, deciding that there were needs that they wanted to address together. In fact, as I was saying, a quote by one very famous French visitor that you all heard about in grad school or college or high school throughout the years. In 1831, he said this: Americans of all ages, conditions, and dispositions constantly unite together. I thought that was interesting. It was like he was surprised. I just assumed that was just the case all the time, right? I have frequently admired the endless skill with which the inhabitants of the United States managed to set a common aim to the efforts of a great number of men and women. We'll just give them a break on that one. And to persuade them to pursue it voluntarily. Alexis de Tocqueville, 1831. So these, my friends, our roots run deep. Okay, so now for a little bit more technical stuff. Today, I'm going to be focusing on a particular type of nonprofit called the 501c3. We call these the public charities because they are formed to provide a public benefit. Foundations are also part of this group, but they tend to be, sometimes they are treated a little bit differently in the tax code. But I do want to point out, particularly since we're at the Chamber of Commerce, that there are, in fact, leave it to the IRS to make it super complicated, there are actually 29 different types of 501Cs in the code, each with their own different stipulation around tax exemption. But for the purposes of today, I want to focus on these groups. And to give you the definition, and I will say Matt and Ken were very interested in this earlier, so I know that some people like to know this kind of detail anyway. The 501c3s, public charities, are exempt from income tax. They are able to receive tax-deductible contributions. They must operate for public benefit. They can have no profits go to private entities, and they can't endorse political candidates. In Maine, these make up 72% of the total number of tax-exempt organizations. Okay, public charities in Maine. How many are there? Such a popular question. Well, as of December 17th, there were, December 2017, there were 6,875 public charities in Maine registered with the IRS. Of those, 2,947 filed tax returns that include financial information. And these are what we call our reporting public charities and are the primary focus of today. I also want to point out that there are of those 2,900, 460 are the private foundations. And this is the number that much of the data I will be presenting today focuses on. I do want to point out that generally the reason for the difference between being registered and filing has a lot to do with the fact that so many of our nonprofits are very small, and nonprofits that have annual receipts under $50,000 a year are not required to file financial data. So that accounts for a number of the difference there. The other is that it doesn't include religious institutions, which are also not required to file. Okay, so the data I'm going to be presenting to you, as Jack so kindly mentioned in the introduction, is our Adding Up Impact Report. This is a biennial snapshot of the Maine nonprofit sector that we've been doing for a number of years with these very generous supporters of ours out in the community. And our next one is going to be coming out at our Nonprofit Day at the State House on January 17th. I'm sorry that I don't have a copy for everyone today. If you would like to, if you're not already on your mailing list, I see so many friends in the audience, and I know you are on our mailing list, but if you think you may not be and you want to find out when the report actually is available, there's a bowl on in the coffee area next to our table, where if you leave your card, we'll make sure you get on our mailing list so that you can get a copy when it's available. The other qualifier here is, in most cases today, I'm going to be giving you the data that's the most recent from our upcoming report, but mea culpa, some of the graphics still have the old data on them, and I will point that out. But I just have to beg your forgiveness. We are literally in production right now. So, all right, let's start with let's not start with unemployment. Let's start with employment, would be a better idea. The nonprofit sector employs 1 in 6 workers in Maine. That's 16% of the workforce. And with our recent data, it's actually 98,000 workers in Maine works for a nonprofit. Nationally, about 1 in 10, or 10% of the workforce, are employed by a nonprofit. Maine's nonprofits employ almost 14 times as many workers as the state's agriculture industry, and more than 3 times as many workers as construction. And nationally, the strength of the sector has increased in recent years and is now the 5th largest employer in the United States. Nearly 2 million nonprofits employ 10.7 million people and produce revenues of nearly $2 trillion annually. So where do they work? What fields? The 3 largest employers by field in the nonprofit sector are hospitals, other healthcare and social assistance organizations, and in education. But you'll see there are plenty others working in the arts, professional and business services, the environment, conducting a lot of other very important missions. I also wanted to show you this slide. This shows nonprofit employment as a percent of total employment by county. The reason why I wanted to point this out is because it may be difficult to see the names, but essentially the more rural counties have a higher reliance on nonprofit employment. And that really makes a lot of sense, because Cumberland is Cumberland County, where we are, is the orange line there. And where you find more private enterprise, you would see the ratio declining. Okay, expenditures. In 2014, Maine's reporting public charities contributed $11 billion to the economy through their wages paid, purchases, and professional service contracts. Our latest figure that's coming out in January is $12.6 billion. Maine nonprofits paid over $4.3 billion in wages. That translates into over $250 million in personal income tax for Maine's state and local governments and close to $700 million in federal income tax revenues. And again, hospitals and human services account for the majority of this spending, yet they only represent a third of public charities overall. I also want to take a moment to just make a note here because sometimes I hear this myth out in the community, but a majority of nonprofits receive relatively little government support. There are only a relatively small number of large organizations that have the capacity to manage the complexity of government grants. And so I just want to really emphasize how when they do receive government revenues, it's really being supplemented and augmented by all the private investment that nonprofits are able to attract. Just as small business makes up most of our private sector, the majority of nonprofits are very small. 75% on this slide, but our latest data has increased that to 77% have annual budgets under $100,000 a year. 77%. 89, almost 90% have annual budgets under $500,000 a year. And then over half are so small with budgets under $50,000, as I said, they aren't even required to file. So what do we take from that? 75% of these nonprofits are community driven. They're mostly volunteers who are running them. And don't underestimate what these nonprofits accomplish. These smaller budgets add up to a huge difference across our state. They address unmet needs, they leverage other dollars, and then there's the volunteer time. Mainers like to volunteer. I guess we're still stuck in the de Tocqueville days. The sector mobilizes over 340,000 volunteers annually who donate the equivalent of over $900 million in time and talent to their communities. In addition, Maine's foundation community is small by national standards, but it brings a very powerful local focus to its grant investments. Over 90% of grants from Maine's top 25 foundations stay right here in Maine. And in 2016, there were 363 foundations that granted nearly $160 million. Okay, so that's the data. I'm going to give you a little bit more data, but I'm going to delve in more specifically to give you some examples of how nonprofits are working for Maine. Oh, that's not true. I actually wanted to address this really common question. Why are there so many nonprofits in Maine? Is that typical? Well, there are almost twice as many nonprofits per capita in Maine than the national average. And it turns out many of our New England states are similar. And I don't know the exact reason. I would have to do some actual research to be able to give you the definitive reason why there are so many in Maine. But I want to offer to you 3 observations, something to think about if you're ever out at a cocktail party and someone's like, why do we have so many nonprofits? Well, maybe you can say to them, as I said at the beginning of this talk, local control. Many of you have probably heard the story, right, about how we have 488 municipalities in Maine for 1.3 million people. And let me see, I know I have this written down. And we have, that's right, 255 school districts for the same number of students that the city of Philadelphia's one school district takes care of. Now, I know that that's a very simplistic statement, But we really like to do things all by ourselves. We really like to make sure that it's done right, and the only way you can do it right is to do it yourself. Okay, so there's this tradition, particularly in New England, for us to solve our own problems locally. The other thing that's important to note is we rely a lot less on county government than other parts of the country. Many other states look to our county government to provide social services that are right here in Maine being done by nonprofit agencies. And the other, this may be a little bit minor, but it's still a point, and I also just find it really fascinating. We're a really big state. Did you know that the other 5 New England states, geographically speaking, could fit inside Maine? So the other thing is, a food pantry in York is not going to help people facing food insecurity in a rustic. It's just not going to happen. We need more infrastructure when we have such a large geography. Just a few observations at your next cocktail party conversation. Okay, now I want to get into some specific examples. I'm going to be featuring 9 of our members and the impact that they're having. And so first I'm going to start with the social safety net. And this goes back again to what I was talking about at the beginning, which irritates me a little bit about the season of giving, which is so focused on helping the needy. Sure, it's definitely important. And I didn't mean to make any of my fundraising friends out there nervous. I mean, I know you're all thinking, Jen, what are you thinking? We need them to fill out those annual appeal forms. And you should, and please do, and give generously. And if December happens to be the month that you're feeling the most generous, great. But there's more to it than that. I would venture to say that the organizations I'm getting ready to highlight here, yeah, they help the disadvantaged for sure. But what they end up doing ends up benefiting us. We should be thanking them for what their contributions are doing to strengthen our community. For instance, caring for the mentally and physical well-being of Mainers of all ages. This photo comes from the Aroostook Area Agency on Aging, and they help older adults stay in their homes as long as possible. They have reduced hospital readmissions by 23% through their home visit program. We know that that saves money to our U.S. healthcare system. They are helping us reduce our costs. The AAAs, the Area Agency on Aging, they're Aroostook partners with 4 others in Maine. This was an organization, these were organizations that were set up in the 1970s by government to figure out ways to save money by keeping people in their homes longer. It's a solution that benefits all of us. Then there's the Bangor Boys and Girls Club that takes care of youth up there. They have boosted high school graduation rates, and it is now 97% of their teens expect to graduate, compared to the state average of 87%. And 69% expect to complete post-secondary compared to 40%. The Bangor Boys and Girls Club is building tomorrow's workforce for the rest of us. See how that works? And the Jewish Community Alliance right here of Southern Maine, right here in Greater Portland, is one of dozens of organizations in Maine that are helping people face food insecurity. Their food pantry serves 700 individuals, 166 families each month in Greater Portland. Why should this matter to us? Because these are the people that are going to be contributing to our society if they can eat appropriately. You see how it benefits all of us? JCA. Next. Now, moving beyond the social safety net, I want to talk about how nonprofits build communities. The Island Institute, based in Rockland, focuses on programs that are working to allow people and the environment to thrive together. The Institute has boosted access to sustainable, affordable energy, which has achieved $8.2 million in household savings. And they're offering training to public officials on sea level rise. This is the clubhouse in Waterville, run by Kennebec Behavioral Health. They have 3 of them statewide. This is an incredible program. Their members, in normal talk, we would call them clients or service recipients. They call them members. In this case, they're putting people with serious mental health challenges back to work. They provided employment to 260 of their members and earned over $1 million in annual paid wages with their members. Again, working on the workforce that we so desperately need in this state. And building communities, partnering with government to build and preserve public structures. Over 6 years, TED for Housing in Brunswick has added 37 units for previously homeless people. Next category, economic development. In addition to all the jobs that I mentioned, 98,000 of them, including many of them, like the clubhouse, providing employment to those who are underemployed, we have organizations like Prosperity Maine, which provides financial services and other supports to help Maine's growing immigrant and refugee community gain their independence. Since it was founded over 10 years ago, they have helped start several small new businesses and guided 190 participants in saving over $1 million toward their independence. Has anybody had a chance to enjoy the Maine Hudson Trail system? This group, this nonprofit organization, has built 80 miles of free public access trails out in the western region. What does that mean? That means that they have seen, due to their work, 60,000 overnight visits since 2008. And you can imagine what that means for the local businesses up there. And then Maine Hudson Trails alone spent nearly $300,000 in 1 year on local farms and at small businesses in the western Maine region. And then there are the arts. And those of you who know my background know that I could probably go well past 9 o'clock to talk about the arts. Waterfell Arts in Belfast is one of 20 arts groups in the greater Belfast region who contribute $2.7 million annually to the region's economy. Average arts attendees spend $26 per event, in addition to the ticket price. Right here in Portland, in 2015, the total expenditures by arts and cultural nonprofits totaled over $75 million in 1 year. So, back to my main point. State depends on strong partnerships between the business, government, and nonprofit sectors. They are central partners with all of you in economic development. They work to fulfill the commitments and programs that are set up by state policymakers. They collaborate on workforce development. They find solutions with cities and towns. These are the ways that we all partner together. I do want to point out before I go into my last section, which is how we can all make a difference, is there are challenges ahead. Nonprofits are constantly being asked to do more with less, and the services keep increasing. The service needs, the community and service needs keep increasing. Nonprofits are particularly, in addition, strained by the workforce shortage. We just had a wage and benefits report released, and we have discovered that nonprofits are not able to are not keeping their wages up with inflation, making it something that we're going to really have to grapple with in terms of future leadership for Maine's nonprofits. So MAMP's role, I'm going to quickly skip through this because Jack already mentioned it, but we are working on education through our professional development trainings on education and leadership. We are working on advocacy at the State House and in Washington, D.C., as well as promoting cross-sector relations so that people can benefit and understand and develop reach across the sectors to make sure we're solving community problems together, and member engagement and connection. Now on to what's your role or how you can help. Policymakers can engage nonprofits as civic leaders and authorities on issues important to voters. Nonprofit leaders, you can help us tell this story and reach out to your colleagues and figure out ways to articulate our collective impact. We have 98,000 of us. We have an incredible collective story to tell. Business leaders, you can recognize the critical role nonprofits play in making Maine a viable place to do business and reach out and to become business partners with us. And then here, board members, please raise your hand if you have served on a board or are currently serving on a board. Yeah, that's almost all of you, okay? And you notice I raised my hand, so I'm gonna give myself a tiny little lecture here too. Board members, we can understand our responsibility toward our organization's mission and commitment to public benefit. We are the stewards of that public benefit deal that we struck with the IRS. That's our job. We can challenge ourselves to ask probing questions about how our nonprofits fit into this complex web that I've just set up for you. And then all of us, we can recognize how Maine nonprofits benefit, each of us, and how they help stretch and supplement taxpayer dollars to improve the lives of Maine residents. And I might also suggest, just think for a minute, because you all are going to fill out that annual appeal card for sure, I know, or go online and do that. Just think for a minute about sending a little note that says, thank you for all your work to make my community a better place to live, work, and visit. So in sum, here's one of my favorite quotes from the late Senator Paul Wellstone. It helps me at times when it seems like our communities are almost irreparably divided. It's actually because I fundamentally believe that we still really want to come together and we want to unite voluntarily, just like the early settlers did. And in this way, I know that we're going to meet our shared needs, and I know that we're going to be able to address the challenges we have ahead and find ways to keep Maine one of the best places on the planet to live, work, and visit. Thank you, Quincy, and thank you to the Portland Regional Chamber for the opportunity to come here today. It really is an honor because there's so many people representing incredible organizations in the room. I also want to thank the Chamber for their leadership in recognizing the economic impact of nonprofits in our communities. Thanks for listening.
Can you remind people to go up to a microphone?
Okay. I know I went on too long. It's funny how when you practice at home, like your kids aren't really paying attention, so you sort of run through and the dog's barking. And I swear it was only 25 minutes when I did it at home. But anyway, happy to take questions, and I think there are mics if anybody has, or just one. No, mic here and a mic there. Anybody has any questions? Oh, there's one over there too.
Jim Cohen, Veraldana, thank you so much for coming and for your remarks. Nonprofits are not taxed. Could you explain a little bit about how we benefit from the fact that nonprofits are not taxed and why that's a good policy?
Well, it's essentially the deal that we've struck, right? So nonprofits aren't there to make a profit. And just in case you needed that explanation. And so the deal is that in order to support the work that we do, and in order to give access to a broad range of public, we need the extra support from tax exemptions to make sure that we can make ends meet. And so I would just say that, you know, nonprofits are working really hard, and they deserve to be recognized through that tax exemption for the work that they're doing to do a lot of the things that, as I said, both the public and the private sector have said, not us.
Good morning, Jen. Felicia Knight with the Knight County Group.
Felicia.
Hi. The workforce shortage is also translating into a board member shortage. I have known in the organization that I'm with, specifically Portland Ovations, When we go to recruit board members, many people say yes, 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 but I can't do it this year because I'm on 4 other boards over here. Maybe you could say a little word about what it means to be a board member, what the rewards and responsibilities are to be a board member for any nonprofit.
Sure, thank you. Well, okay. It's great being on a board. You should all try it. As I was indicating, board members have the opportunity to do the community a true service by supporting an organization that is sitting within this web of a complex web of other organizations that are trying to solve community problems and address opportunities. And as a board leader, you get to have a say in how the policies of that organization gets established. It's an amazing leadership opportunity, especially for younger people. Felicia didn't know that she was allowing me to give a plug for our Emerging Leaders program, which is once every fall we train 25 young young professionals from all 3 sectors on how to become effective nonprofit board members. And what I say to the young people coming in is that this is a tremendous opportunity for you to test your leadership skills outside of your place of business or work, and to connect with your colleagues who are also wanting to make a difference. So I would just make a plug for so many of us want to give back to our communities. Board service it's a commitment. I'm not going to lie to you there. If you're not willing to make the commitment, I probably am not going to recommend raising your hand and not being willing to take it on. But we at MAMP have lots of resources, so it doesn't have to be very difficult. We have a whole checklist of things, so if you like lists, we can help you. But the getting involved in your communities and the leadership opportunities are definitely very strong for people who are interested in board service.
Peter, excuse me, Peter Plum from Murray, Plum & Murray. This
Hi,
is the
Peter.
flip side of Jim Cohen's question. Part of the attraction of the nonprofit sector for many of us has been the deductibility for tax purposes of our gifts.
Yes.
Now with a massive change in the tax code, that deductibility either in most cases becomes irrelevant or is gone altogether. My question is, have you seen yet any impact on giving from the loss of the charitable deduction for 95% of people?
We're not going to see that until tax returns come in, right, for this year. So there isn't any definitive data on that. What we do know is what financial advisors are recommending to people because of that. And what they are recommending to people is to hold on to your money and to hold on to it and bundle it so that you can meet the tax exemption one year, and then the next year you don't give any. And you know, this is their job, financial advisors, to figure out how to make the most sense for their clients. I don't begrudge that. That's just the reality. With such a high threshold, it makes more sense for people to bundle their contributions until they reach that limit. Interesting approach. I tell you, that throws a whole host of challenges for nonprofits that have to meet their annual operating budget without having to lay people off and without having to cut back services. So we haven't seen any definitive data. We won't for a little bit, but we do know that it's probably coming, because it just makes financial sense when you're told that the limit has increased. And besides, I'm really concerned about, I'm not sure, before the whole thing was passed, that you could find a report that would say, don't worry, people are still going to give, and then there'd be another report that said people are going to stop giving. I mean, it'll be really interesting. Even in my own family, you know, we had to ask ourselves, how much does it matter that there's that line at the bottom that says, your $100 is tax deductible? It'll be interesting to see that, but I will take just a minute to mention that what we are finding in the fundraising community is that just similar to the dissolution in the middle class, we're losing the middle donors. We used to have much more of an even pyramid in terms of the size of gift. And what we're seeing is that the low gift amounts, those are staying really stable. People are still giving at the $25, $50, $100 level. But what we see is then everything gets really skinny. And fewer people are giving in that mid-range, between 1,000 to 100,000 level. And then it just explodes. And it's a few people giving a ton of money, which is very generous, but I will leave you with the thought that that leaves in the hands of a selective few the community solutions that they're investing in and choosing for us what to prioritize. Just a little tidbit for you. Not that I have an opinion about it.
Morning, Jen.
Hi, Bryce. I swear, these are like all my friends. It's so funny.
Yeah, Bryce Hawk with Maine Food for Thought. Just with all of your experience connecting with nonprofits across really the entire sector, what are your hopes for the future of Maine's nonprofit sector that might be distinct from where we are right now?
So my first hope is that you all took away the real idea that nonprofits are part of a system that we all benefit from. It's not just for a selected few. It's not just us giving handouts. It's for all of us. Nonprofits are doing things that touch every single part of our lives, and we need to be responsible for them. But to be more specific to Bryce's question, the first thing that comes to mind, and that was sort of a necklace? No. The first thing that comes to mind is for board members and then external partners to really understand and challenge the true cost of delivering the services that nonprofits take care of. The culture in nonprofits, we are asked to do more with less, but we have actually embodied a culture of let's do more with less. Like we actually sit around the coffee table and say, what more can we do? What else could we do today? We're constantly asking ourselves, there are programs we need to start. There are people who need our services. What can we do? And then someone turns to me and says, with what new people, Jen? Nonprofits are asked to do it, and then we culturally embody it. We really need to come to terms with what it really costs. And I'm not talking about extravagant. Yes, there are nonprofits out there that need to get their ethics in line around how they spend their money, how they compensate some of their staff. I'm all for that. But the vast majority of nonprofits are super efficient with their money. And it really, my hopes and dreams would be that we all had a better sense of what is the true financial sustainability that's required to preserve these services that we all have come to depend on.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Bree O'Malley.
Oh.
Sit here. No worries.
Wah.
3 mics.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you, Felicia, for teeing this up as well. Curious if you could say more about the workforce, the gaps that you're seeing in the workforce, and what we might be doing as a community to fill those gaps that are critical to staff up our nonprofits in Maine.
Yeah, so we have been doing a program over the last couple of years called Mission-Driven Leadership. And it's in response to a report that came out from colleagues of ours at Third Sector New England that talked about the leadership changes that are on the horizon for nonprofit organizations. And many of us know in Maine, we have a particularly acute challenge with one of the oldest states in the nation. And what that means is that we're going to have leadership positions throughout in every sector that are going to need to be addressed. And so it's a complicated nut to crack, for sure. One of the things that we can do is through our wage and benefits report, which all of you should have copies of. If you don't, we'll figure out how you again, leave your card in the bowl and we can get you information on that. Back to the true cost, it really is going to come down to competitive wages, I'm afraid. I mean, the nonprofit, the for-profit sector is having a problem even with some of our companies being able to offer competitive wages. But if we don't even begin to start being realistic about getting up to inflation increases, I think that has to be our number one priority. I think our number one priority has to be talent. And another culture example of the nonprofit community, and we had a speaker at our nonprofit finance conference who talked about this last week. Once again, nonprofits externally have been asked to do this, and then they've internalized doing this, which was we try to keep our overhead costs super low, right? It just goes to show how much how many times we put on our hair shirts, right, and come to work and make sure that we're delivering all those services as tough as we can. We focus so much on making sure that we deliver program. And the idea of turning to overhead costs sort of makes everybody go like this. If we want to address the workforce shortage and the leadership shortage, we are going to have to address talent and investing in that talent and recruiting that talent in a way that increases the diversity of the workers that we have here and increases the competitiveness of those jobs. That would be my number one thing. And that's where all board members can come in. You can ask the question, have we adequately invested in our staff? Before you pass that budget, do me that one favor. Ask the question, have we adequately invested in our staff? Because it's going to cost a lot more to replace them.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, good.
Oh, good.
I'm Nancy Kroll, 501c3 employee, Scarborough Public Library. I wanted to note the fact that the Regional Chamber of Commerce did not allow nonprofits to be members until I believe it was the 1980s. And I would like to think that now that we are able to join as members, that we are offering a new perspective that's very healthy for our communities. And I also want to challenge community chambers to look into your communities and see if there are ways that you can engage the nonprofits that are residing in your local communities. I like to think that we bring a different energy. Certainly the culture is somewhat different, but we all benefit from that partnership, both the business side as well as the nonprofit side. I got an MBA in business management thanks to my colleagues in the Scarborough Chamber of Commerce. So I want to encourage us to work together. It's healthy for our communities, and Jen has given a wonderful presentation of the challenges that we all face. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Jack. Do I leave?
Thank you, Jen, for that very informative and highlighting the importance of nonprofits. And just kudos to you and your team at the Maine Association of Nonprofits. As somebody, as many in the room, has served on nonprofit boards, the leadership training, the board training that you provide is second to none. So we thank you for that. And from one 501c6 to one 501c3, we'll be providing a donation on behalf of the Portland Community Chamber to the Maine Association of Nonprofits. So thank you again. As always, you can stay up to date by the Chamber's Facebook page, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Just a quick preview, next month we will be featuring Dr. Ed Liu of Jackson Laboratories, and in February we will be welcoming Rich Gotham, president of the Boston Celtics, to Eggs and Issues. So we'll see you at the next couple of Eggs and Issues. Have a wonderful holiday season.